So hi guys, I had an issue with two of my videos that I recorded. The audio wasn't there, so I don't know what actually happened. So I can't really redo the video, so I'm just going to do a voiceover on the video. So bear with me and just follow along. So sorry. So this video is a continuation of the maths. I think this is part 3, and we're going to continue with profit and loss percentage, because in the last video we did simple interest and compound interest. So now we're going to move on to profit and loss percentage. So profit and loss, uh, we define profit to be the selling price minus the cost price, and loss to be the cost price minus the selling price. Now, this is just profit and this is just loss. If we wanted to get the percentage, we have to, multiply it by 100. I believe we should already be clear of that if our basics in mathematics is strong. So now we have the formula for profit to be selling price minus cost price, the formula for loss to be cost price minus selling price. So percentage profit is basically profit or cost price multiplied by 100. While the loss percentage is basically loss over cost price multiplied by 100. So now I want us to actually solve a question. It's actually pretty simple. So we're given the cost price of, let me see, a bag of apples to be 800, while it was sold for 1000 naira. Now we're asked to calculate the profit percentage. Now how do we actually go about it? So very simply, let's rewrite the formula for profit. So profit is given to be selling price minus cost price. So SP minus CP. But there's one common fact about how to identify if the question is asking us, because sometimes they may not ask you, they may not tell you that you should calculate profit percentage. Sometimes they'll just calculate whether it is a profit or a loss. So one easy way you can detect whether it is a profit or a loss is by understanding that profit usually comes in the form of selling price being greater than cost price, while loss comes in the form of cost price being greater than selling price. So in this question, our selling price is greater than the cost price, so it's going to be a profit. And this analogy actually makes sense, because if we want to let's just put it into like realistic sense. If we have a pen that costs 100 naira, or let's say you buy a pen that is 100 naira, and you resell it for 150, your profit will be 50 naira. But if you resell it for 100, your profit will be 0 naira. Now, what if the person who buys the pen decides to sell it for 50? He is making a loss of 50 naira. I'm So now just imagine that this square here is his bank account, and he removes the 100 naira when he buys the pen. So his current bank account is what? 0. Now imagine he now sells it for 50 naira. What is his new bank account balance? 50 naira. And that is lower than what he had in his bank account originally. So I believe this analogy of the pen and the man should make sense. So I'll just wipe that off and now we'll continue with our question. So cost price is what? 800. Selling price is what? 1000. So let's input it into our formula to calculate the profit. So 1000 minus 800 is going to give you 200. So that's the profit. The profit is 200. Now what about the percentage profit? So percentage profit, we have it to be profit over cost price multiplied by 100. So I hope you see the reason why we had to first calculate the profit instead of jumping straight into the percentage profit. So let's continue. So percentage profit is given to us as profits over cost price multiplied by 100. So we'll fill it in. So now we're going to input the values. So that is going to be 200 over our cost price, which we have to be 800 multiplied by 100. So if we, let me just use another color to show how to just solve it without using a calculator. So all the zeros will cancel out except the 100 zeros. So now 2 in 8 will give you what? 4. 2 in 100 will give you what? 50. Now we can also say 2 in 2 will give you 1, and then 2 in 4 will give you 2. So our final formula is going to be half times 50. And just write that out. Half times 50. So 2 in 2 will give you 1, and 2 in 50 will give you 25. So then we have 1 times 25 all over 1. So we're going to have 25%. So that is our percentage profit. So that's everything you actually need to know about percentage profit and loss. It's actually pretty simple. So now let's move on to our next topic in our list, which is ratio, proportion, and rate. But before we move on, let me give you a couple of questions that you can solve and drop the answers in the comment section. So a bag is bought for 2,500 naira and sold for 3,000 naira. Find the profit percent. The second question is a phone is sold for 18,000 naira at a loss of 2,000 naira. Find the loss percent. So just solve and drop your answers in the comment section. So our next topic is ratio, proportion, and rates. So let's actually deal with it. So what exactly is a ratio? A ratio is the comparison of two quantities. If we take, for example, 2:3, it can also be written as 2 all over 3, or 4:5, which can also be written as 4 all over 5. Now let's look at proportion. So proportion are two ratios that are equal. For example, 2:3, or 2:3 is the same as 4:6, and we also have 2:4 is the same as 1:2. So this is very, very similar to equivalent fractions, okay? So if we were to break it down, we'll have 2:4. If we say 2 to go in the numerator and the denominator, we'll have 1:2. So that's how they're similar. If you're not clear, watch my video on equivalent fractions. So there are two ways we can write it. You can either write it as fractions, or we can write it with the colon, which is a ratio. So now what is rate? Rate is comparing the quantities of different units. For example, we have speed. Speed is kilometer per hour. So if you are not clear on this, okay, my video in physics should also make this clear. So speed is basically distance over time. So distance is measured with meters or kilometer, and time is measured with hour or seconds. So that's why we have kilometer per hour. So that's mainly what you need to know about ratio, proportion, and rate. So let's take a look at a question that says share 600 in the ratio 2 to 3. So how do you go about this question? How do you solve it? It's actually pretty simple and direct. So we have to add the 2 and 3 to get the total parts. So 2:3, the total parts will be what? 5, because 2:3 is going to have 5 parts. That is going to be 2 plus 3. That's how we get the 5 parts, okay? Now, how do we solve how do we share it in that ratio? Now that we have the total parts, how do we actually solve it? So you guys are just going to have to forgive my handwriting. So the first share is going to look like this. We're going to take the 2, because the first share here is 2, then we have ratio 3, okay? So the first share is 2, and the second share is 3. So the 2, we take the 2, because it's all over 5, and then multiply it by 600. So that will give you the first share. So 2 over 5 multiplied by 600. That will give you the first share. And now that you can see the formula we use for the first share, can you guess what the formula would be for the second share? Just think about it. So now let's solve this together without using a calculator. So 2 over 5 times 600. 5 into 60 will give you 12, and then we'll just put that 0 up there. So then 5 and 600 will be what? 120. So 2 times 120 will give you 240. So we have 3 over 5 times 600 for the second share. And what if you guessed it right? Now, we just use the same method and say 5 and 600 give you 120, and then 3 times 120 will give you 360. But there's also an easy way to solve it. If you already have the formula or the value for the first share, and then you need to get the second share, all you can simply do is say 600 minus 240, and that will give you 360 still. So both methods are correct, and it usually works for the ratio that only has two values, not like you have 2 ratio 3 ratio 4 ratio 5. It can still work when you want to solve the last value, but it works very, very beautifully when you only have two values of the ratio. Do you understand? So that's about ratio, proportion, and rates. So we have the first share to be 240 and the second share to be 360. Make sure to always write it down in your question paper if you are given this kind of question in an exam like JAM or WAEC. Okay. Because they always want to see your workings. They always want to see it. You have to explain the steps one by one. So now we want to actually take a look at our last topic, which is shares and value added tax. So value added tax, you also know it as VAT, alright? So don't be confused if you see it in an exam and they tell you to find the VAT and you're only familiar with value added tax. Value added tax is VAT in the short form. So shares is the money that is shared among people according to a given ratio. While value added tax is just tax that is added to goods and services. Okay, so VAT actually has a formula, and that formula is rate all over 100 multiplied by the cost. So let's say we want to solve this example that says find the VAT on 2000 naira if we're given the rate to be 7.5%. So we're going to have 7.5 all over 100 and then multiply it by 2000. I think that is very clear. We're just doing this. We're just filling in the values into the formula. So VAT is equal to rate over 100 multiplied by cost. So 7.5 over 100 multiplied by 2000, and that will give you 150. You can input that into your calculator to actually check if that is correct. Let me give you one quick example. Find the VAT on, or find the VAT on 8,000 naira at 7.5%. So we're done with all the topics in this part of maths. See you in the next class.